Much you gave, it was never enough. What if the love you sacrificed for only chipped away at your dignity instead of building you up? This story might resonate deeply, especially if you're older and have faced the challenge of loving someone who couldn't see past your age. In today's video, I'll tell you a story that dives right into the raw reality of a man who tried to bridge a generational gap in love, only to realize the cost it was taking on his self-worth. At first he thought he could handle the teasing, the subtle hints that he wasn't young enough, fast enough, strong enough. But over time, the quiet jabs turned into painful reminders that his partner valued the vigor of youth over the wisdom and depth that come with age. Despite his efforts to find worth in other ways, he began to feel smaller, questioning his worth as a man. This isn't just a story about romantic struggle, it's about reclaiming dignity, understanding the value of self-love, and knowing when it's time to say enough. If you've ever faced the sting of rejection or felt undermined in a relationship, this story will hit close to home. You'll witness his journey towards self-respect as he learns that his worth doesn't rest on the approval of someone who only sees the surface. Stay tuned, because by the end of this video, you'll not only feel inspired by his journey, but will also gain 5 important lessons that are invaluable for anyone facing relationship challenges in their later years. These lessons remind us that dignity, self-worth, and peace are worth far more than any fleeting approval. You'll discover how to stand strong against the pressures of trying to prove yourself, especially when you already know your worth. So if you're ready to reclaim your self-respect, let's dive into this powerful story. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me. And if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. As the months drifted by, he began to notice subtle shifts in her behavior, shifts that slowly, almost imperceptibly, began to unravel him. At first it was small, seemingly insignificant remarks, a comment here or there veiled in humor, yet laced with something more. She would tell him that he needed to take better care of himself, that a man his age shouldn't have so many aches and pains, as though his body were some sort of disappointment. He chuckled nervously, at first telling himself it was just her way of joking, trying to lighten the mood, but the jokes kept coming more frequent, more biting. Each one was like a small, silent barb that stuck in his mind, and slowly over time the laughter became heavier. Weighed down by an uncomfortable truth, he tried desperately to ignore that perhaps just maybe he wasn't enough for her anymore. The comments, once playful, began to chip away at the man he thought he was. Every joke seemed to carry an unspoken message, an implication that he was too old for her, too slow, too fragile. His once vibrant self-confidence started to wither beneath her criticisms. He tried to laugh it off and shrug it away, but her words began to hold more weight than he realized. They were a constant reminder, like an echo that reverberated in his mind, that his body no longer matched the vigor of her youth, and that in her eyes that was a flaw, a deficiency. And then, without warning, her criticisms took a darker, sharper turn. What had started as offhand comments now became direct attacks on his very masculinity, his self-worth, and his identity as a lover. She began to point out cruelly that he was slow and predictable in bed. He had always believed that emotional closeness, tenderness, and the ability to truly connect with someone were what mattered most in intimacy, but to her it seemed none of that mattered. Her scornful words cut through him with the force of a dagger. She said that he couldn't satisfy her like a younger man could, that his touch was inadequate, unworthy of someone as vibrant as her. His heart sank. These were not just hurtful words, they were a direct assault on everything he had come to believe about himself. He had always thought he could give her something deeper than youthful energy, something more enduring. But now, in the face of her accusations, he felt as though he had failed her, failed himself, failed them both. He tried to reason with her, to plead for her understanding, to explain that his age didn't define his ability to bring her happiness. But she wasn't listening. She had made up her mind. Her words were final, cutting through any attempt he made to salvage his dignity. Desperate to prove that he still had something to offer, he told her that although he may not possess the strength or vitality of youth, he had learned over the years how to please her in ways that didn't require physical prowess. He had found other subtler ways to be intimate, ways that came from patience, from understanding, from knowing how to give and receive in a deep and lasting manner. He told her that he had mastered the art of oral sex, that he knew how to draw her pleasure in a way that was unique to him, to their bond. His voice was steady but vulnerable, filled with a kind of quiet confidence that only comes from years of experience. He wasn't just offering his body but his heart, his care, his devotion. But instead of receiving his sincerity with the respect it deserved, she mocked him. Her laughter was cruel, dismissive, as if she was somehow repulsed by his attempt to remain relevant, to prove his worth in her eyes, an old man trying to be useful. She scoffed, her disdain dripping from every word. It was a slap in the face, one that left him reeling, feeling smaller. Less than her contempt shattered him in a way he hadn't anticipated. But still, despite the sting, he clung to the hope that this was a test, a challenge to his patience and resilience. He convinced himself that if he could just be understanding, just show her how much he cared, she would eventually see the value in him and the life they had shared. But with each cruel remark, with every dismissive glance, he found himself slipping deeper into a pit of self-loathing. Her words made him question everything he had once known about himself. He began to wonder if he was in fact nothing more than a relic of the past, someone whose age rendered him invisible, irrelevant. It was as if in her eyes, he no longer had anything of value to offer, a thought that gnawed at him day and night. For anyone on the outside looking in, it might seem easy to criticize his decision to stay, to endure the constant humiliation. But those who have truly loved to understand how love, even in its most painful form, can keep you captive. It makes you see beyond the surface, beyond the hurt. And sometimes you end up convincing yourself that you are the one who must change, who must try harder, who must prove yourself worthy. He no longer felt bound by her youth alone, but by the illusory hope that he could somehow prove his worth to someone who couldn't see him for who he truly was. It was an exhausting, soul-crushing cycle, but he couldn't seem to break free one night after yet another cruel confrontation that left him feeling smaller than ever. He found himself standing alone in front of the mirror, gazing at the man who had once been full of life, full of pride. Now he saw a 70-year-old man, his face lined with time, his eyes heavy with the weight of experience. He stared at his reflection. And for the first time in a long while, he truly saw himself, not as she had seen him, not as an aging, flawed man, but as someone who had lived, who had loved, who had learned and grown. And in that moment, a realization hit him like a tidal wave. Self-love had to speak louder than her cruel words, louder than any external validation he had sought for so long. He had allowed himself to be diminished by her opinions, by her rejection, but that had to stop. With a deep breath, he made a decision. He was done living in the shadow of someone else's judgment. He deserved more than this. The next day, he walked into her home with a calm resolve, his heart heavy, but determined. He told her quietly and firmly that he could no longer continue the relationship as much as he loved her. He could not stay in a situation where he was constantly humiliated, where he was made to feel less than who he was. She was stunned, her eyes wide with disbelief. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to stand up for himself, to walk away from her for a moment. He saw her confusion, her surprise, and in that moment something inside him shifted. He had regained a piece of himself, his dignity, his strength, his self-respect. The conversation was painful. It was full of tears, regrets, and unspoken words, but it was also liberating. He felt like a man again, a man who was not defined by the judgments of others, but by his sense of worth. It was an act of wisdom, not weakness. As he left her house, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders, a relief he hadn't experienced in months. He was no longer bound by her expectations or her disdain. He was free to love himself, free to embrace the person he had become. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sort of loneliness, but it wasn't the despairing loneliness he had felt before. It was dignified. Solitude, one that allowed him the space to rediscover himself, to reconnect with the things that mattered most. He reached out to old friends and rekindled relationships he had let slip over the years. He traveled to places he had once dreamed of visiting, but had put off for too long. He rediscovered hobbies that brought him joy, passions he had set aside for the sake of others. He began to understand that his worth didn't depend on her or anyone else's approval. It was inherent in the life he had lived in, the experiences he carried with him, and in the person he was now. Each wrinkle on his face told a story of perseverance, of lessons learned, of love given and received. Each gray hair was a memory, a symbol of the life he had led with dignity, a life that had value regardless of the number of years or the physical changes he had undergone. He came to accept that aging wasn't something to fear, something to hide. It was something to embrace, for it brought with it wisdom. The wisdom to know what truly mattered, and in the quiet solitude of his newfound peace, he discovered that the love he had been seeking all along was the love he needed to give himself in time. He learned to cherish the essence of who he was unconditionally and without apology. He knew that true love doesn't diminish you, it elevates you. It doesn't judge you for the passage of time, it respects the person you have become. And with that understanding, he moved forward into the next chapter of his life, one where he no longer sought approval, but instead found contentment in knowing that he was enough just as he was. He had spent so many years sacrificing his happiness, his desires, and his very sense of self, all in the name of trying to please someone else. His life had become an endless cycle of compromise and self-neglect. For so long, he believed that to be loved, to be seen, he needed to erase parts of himself, his dreams, his needs, his truth. But somewhere along the way, something shifted. He realized that he no longer had to bend, had to erase himself, just to make someone else happy. He no longer had to keep sacrificing his sense of peace and joy. He discovered a deeply empowering truth. It was time to focus on pleasing himself, honoring his own needs, his own values, and his own self-respect. He deserved it. This transformation didn't come easily, and it certainly didn't come without its challenges. But as he stood at this crossroads in life, he understood that he could no longer keep putting his peace, his dignity, and his identity in the hands of others. For those who are older, and especially those who are grappling with similar doubts and fears about love, this story serves as a wake-up call. It is a reminder that seeking love is not only natural but essential. Yet it must never come at the cost of our inner peace, our dignity, or our sense of self-worth. Time, as it inevitably marches on, brings with it lessons that can only be fully understood through experience. Only those who have lived long enough can truly grasp how vital it is to preserve the sanctity of one's own heart and soul, even when the world seems intent on convincing us otherwise. As he looked back, he realized that the relationship was not a failure, but a profound learning experience, one that taught him deep transformative lessons in acceptance, the importance of holding on to his values, and how to stand firm in his truth, no matter what anyone else thought or said. He had become more than just a man in a relationship. He had become a man who had learned the true meaning of self-love, self-dignity, and peace. He learned that to be loved by others, he first had to love and embrace himself. Every part of himself. This meant accepting his flaws, his imperfections, his aging body, and the beautiful wisdom that had come with every wrinkle, every gray hair. It meant understanding that the essence of who he was, his kindness, his intelligence, his strength, was worth loving, even if he wasn't perfect by society's fleeting standards. The decision to leave the relationship, to walk away from something that no longer served him, was not just an act of ending something painful. It was an act of reclaiming himself, of choosing his peace over toxic love, of setting boundaries that honored his soul. For anyone who hears this story, it is a powerful reminder that self-love is not just a nice idea. It is essential, and that sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves is to step away from situations that diminish us. This story is not just for the young or the middle-aged. It is a story for those who have lived long enough to understand the intricacies of time, love, and self-worth. Only those who have experienced the full breadth of life's challenges can truly understand how priceless dignity is, and how it is something that should never be compromised for anyone or anything. Through this process of deep reflection and healing, he learned that a man's worth is not determined by the number of years he's lived, or the physical strength that naturally wanes with time. A man's worth is measured by the integrity with which he faces the adversities life throws his way. It is the integrity that allows him to walk through life with grace, to rise after every fall, and to stay true to his values, even when the world tells him he should do otherwise. Integrity is what transforms every wrinkle into a badge of wisdom, every gray hair into a symbol of survival and strength. His story is not just about relationships and love. It's about living authentically, growing into the person you were always meant to be, and never compromising on the things that truly matter: peace, dignity, self-respect. Now, as he shares his story, he hopes to impart 5 deeply important lessons to others, lessons that he believes are especially valuable for those who are older and who may find themselves wrestling with the complexities of relationships. In their later years, these lessons are rooted in the hard-earned wisdom that only comes through life's many experiences, and they offer crucial guidance for anyone who is navigating the tumultuous waters of love and self-discovery. In their later years, the first lesson is a tough but necessary one. No matter how tempting or alluring it may seem to relive the spark of youth with someone younger, we must stay grounded in the truth of who we are. It is easy to get swept up in the idea that youth is synonymous with vitality, and that our worth is somehow tied to our ability to recapture it. But just like the main character of the story, many people in their later years find themselves pouring their energy, time, and love into relationships that deep down do not value them for who they truly are. They become consumed with the need to prove their vitality, to relive moments of youth, and in the process, they allow themselves to be mistreated and disrespected. The desire to prove one's worth can become a trap, and it often leads to accepting emotional neglect or humiliations that at any other stage of life would have been unacceptable. Love in its truest form should never be a contest of endurance or a means to prove one's worth. It should be a safe space for mutual respect, understanding, and appreciation of each other as equals. The second lesson is a crucial one. The importance of self-love cannot be overstated. In his case, tolerating cruel comments about his age, his performance, and his physical limitations, thinking that he had to endure this kind of disrespect in the name of love, was slowly eroding his self-worth. He had convinced himself that suffering in silence was noble, that enduring the pain and humiliation of criticism was part of what it meant to love. But in reality, he was losing something far more precious. His dignity, his sense of self, and his peace. Loving yourself is not a mere indulgence or a fleeting feeling. It is a fundamental commitment to your well-being. When we forget our worth, when we stop seeing ourselves as deserving of kindness and respect, we become vulnerable to the disregard of others. And it is only when we learn to honor ourselves that we can truly build healthy, fulfilling relationships based on mutual love and respect. The third lesson centers on the courage it takes to say enough. It takes immense bravery to face solitude, even if it's temporary, and recognize it not as a punishment, but as a form of peace, a space to heal, to reflect, to rebuild. When he chose to leave the toxic relationship, he was not just walking away from someone else, he was walking towards a better version of himself. He was choosing the more difficult but infinitely more dignified path of embracing solitude rather than continuing to endure emotional neglect in that solitude. He found a quiet peace, a peace that no one could take from him, a peace that restored his soul. Sometimes, solitude is not a form of punishment, it is a sacred space where we can rediscover who we truly are and build our strength. The fourth lesson speaks to the value of our experiences in old age. Our bodies may slow down, but the wisdom we've gained through the years is a treasure beyond measure. Every wrinkle tells a story, every gray hair carries the weight of experience, and every scar speaks to a battle fought and won. In his case, he realized that he didn't need to fit into some artificial ideal of youth and beauty. What he had was much deeper. He had a lifetime of memories, lessons, and wisdom that no one could ever take from him. Those who chase after superficial beauty will never understand the richness of a life fully lived. And he had learned the hard way that it wasn't worth trying to please anyone who couldn't see the beauty in the depth of his character, the wisdom in his eyes, and the love in his heart. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment one below to let me know that you are still here with me. The fifth lesson touches the very heart of love. Men who take the time to pay attention to their partner's pleasure, who show care, tenderness, and affection in ways that go beyond physical performance are often the ones who demonstrate the most generosity in relationships even without the vigor of youth. He learned that love and affection don't have to be defined by physical vitality. He could still express his love in tender ways through small gestures, kind words, and thoughtful acts of care. But respect is the foundation of everything. Offering love and pleasure to a partner should never become an obligation, a duty, or a means of humiliation. It should be an act of affection, a shared bond between two people who honor each other's needs and desires. In the end, this story is not just a personal journey. It is a powerful testament to the importance of self-respect, of living authentically, and of understanding the profound value of love, both the love we give and the love we allow ourselves to receive. It is a reminder that no matter our age, we are worthy of love, dignity, and peace, and that sometimes the most courageous thing we can do is to walk away from relationships that no longer serve us, and to embrace the freedom that comes with reclaiming ourselves. As we close out this story, let's take a moment to truly absorb what it reveals about the journey of love, self-worth, and dignity. We've walked alongside a man who gave everything he had, hoping his patience and love would break through the barriers of age and insecurity, but he ultimately learned a profound truth. Real love isn't about proving oneself to anyone else. It's about embracing the value you hold just as you are, and refusing to sacrifice your peace or dignity to meet someone else's fleeting expectations. So now I ask you, what has this story taught you? Perhaps it's the power of self-respect, the importance of walking away when a relationship no longer uplifts you, or the reminder that all love that respects, values, and embraces you fully has no age limit. Each lesson in this journey speaks to the courage needed to protect your worth, even if it means facing the unknown. I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections. What's one thing you're taking from this story that you'll carry into your own life? Is there a way you've been undervaluing yourself, or a boundary you now realize you need to set? Share one insight you'll bring into practice, something you believe could make a real difference. Your comments not only inspire others, they're a powerful step toward change and self-empowerment. If this video has struck a chord with you, please take a moment to share your thoughts below. And if you found value in this message, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, let's keep these conversations alive, bringing wisdom, dignity, and self-love to each step of our journey. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to hearing how this story has resonated with each of you. Music.